Hi, welcome to today's Collaborative Solutions webinar, Simple Strategies for Successful Compensation Planning and Open Enrollment. My name is Kate Zagurski, and I'm a member of the Collaborative Solutions marketing team. On behalf of Collaborative, we're delighted that you're joining our webinar today as our speakers share proven best practices and strategies that will deliver big results for two important annual HR events. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping items. First, all participants are in listen-only mode and will be muted throughout the webinar. Second, if you have any questions, please submit them using the chat box, and we will have a short Q&A at the end of the presentation. Now, I'd like to introduce a little bit about Collaborative Solutions. We are the longest tenured Workday deployment partner, but we are also a global finance, HR, and student transformation consultancy. It is our mission to help you get the best end-to-end experience from strategy and change management to deployment and post-production services. And we do this with over 625 customers in 125 countries with a 98% customer satisfaction rating. It is our goal to ensure that our customers are long-term partners with us so that they are able to adopt all the benefits of Workday as they grow. Now, I'd like to introduce today's webinar speakers and my fellow Collabie colleagues. First, we have Valerie Dixon. She is a senior principal consultant in our HCM Continuous Value Services practice. She has over 7 years of experience in the Workday ecosystem and over 20 years of functional experience in compensation with an emphasis in HR applications, data, and analytics. She is currently Workday certified in HCM Core, Comp, and Talent. Next up is Melissa Campbell. She is a principal consultant in our HCM Continuous Value Services practice. Prior to joining Collaborative, Melissa was instrumental in implementing the benefits platform for a financial services company and was their primary benefits administrator. She has over 4 years experience in the Workday ecosystem and has spent over 20 years as an HR practitioner in various roles. She is currently certified in Workday HCM and benefits. And lastly, we have Sarah Halstead joining us. Sarah is a manager in our organizational change and training practice. She has been in the Workday ecosystem and at Collaborative for over 6.5 years, 5 of which she has served as a functional HCM lead. Okay, let's take a quick look at the agenda. Valerie will be leading today's discussion as she shares details on how to evaluate, prepare, and launch your annual event. Next, Melissa will discuss best practices for getting ready for open enrollment, as well as details on new Workday enhancements. Lastly, Sarah will share strategies for ensuring successful user adoption post-go live. And with that, let's get started. I'll hand it over to you, Valerie.
Thank you, Kate. I appreciate it very much. And thank you to everyone who has joined the call today. Kate, thank you. I'm going to briefly discuss preparing for a compensation review event. A compensation review event is a business process, typically the initiate merit business process, which can do any or all of the following. It can adjust a worker's base pay, it can award a bonus, adjust an allowance, or grant stock, for example. These awards can be planned for together during a consolidated event, or they can be planned for individually in separate events. What generally determines if you need to launch a single event or multiple events is whether or not the workflow to propose and approve the various types of awards is the same or different. The workflow can include the type of organization, the planner, or key dates for the process that might be different from one event to another. When I'm working with a client to prepare for a compensation review event, I typically think of it in 3 phases: evaluate, prepare, and launch. Let's take a look at those three phases. So what steps should you take to evaluate your process? I'm sure you can all think of things that you would do to evaluate, but these are some of the key points that I remember as I'm working with a client to evaluate their processes. If you've completed a compensation review event in the past, it can be very helpful to review the process and identify parts of the process that could be improved. Discuss with key stakeholders to identify their specific needs and requests. Ideally, this will occur at the completion of your event while details and the pain points that you experienced are still fresh. Documenting these details right away can provide a roadmap for changes to the process that will improve the experience for everyone. You should also consider new functionality that may have become available since you last completed an event. New functionality can not only improve your process, but can potentially replace workarounds that you may have in place that require manual intervention or ongoing maintenance to keep functioning correctly. Depending on the complexity of your specific process and the amount of changes you're considering for your configuration, I would typically allow 12 to 16 weeks prior to the launch of your compensation review event to configure, test, and evaluate your changes. Remember, you may have to account for new Workday releases if the normal cadence for these releases, March and September, intersects with your compensation review event. Your timeline for the actual event will also impact your planning. The longer you leave the event open or in progress, or the longer the time frame between your actual launch date and the organization or compensation snapshot date will impact ongoing worker transactions like job changes or reorganizations, for example, that'll have to be accounted for as a part of the process or audited on the back end of the event. Another key thing to evaluate is performance results. If your compensation review event includes performance results, be sure to discuss and integrate the timeline for these events into your overall project timeline. Additionally, changes in review templates or rating scales, for example, will have a downstream impact on plan level details like compensation matrices. Ideally, your performance reviews, if they're included as part of the process, will be complete prior to the launch of the compensation review event to ensure that the performance results are final, particularly if they are being used as a basis to calculate awards. You should note that performance review ratings can be reported for in-progress or complete reviews, but if a planner has already submitted their award recommendations, these will not update to align with changes to a review rating. If no performance rating is available for the worker, the event will use the default target on the plan to calculate the worker's contributions to the pool or the proposed award amount. You should also identify the organization type and the roles that will be used for the compensation review process. Roles should be properly associated with the organization type you choose to use for the process and can include planner roles as well as support roles. Planner roles will always have view and modify so that they can propose the awards. Support roles, like an HR business partner, for example, can have view or modify capabilities, or maybe I should say view and or modify capabilities. You should remember that support roles do not receive an inbox task for the event, but they can view the in-progress activity for the event via reports like the compensation search employees or organization reports. Additionally, they can be provided with access to other custom reports and receive notifications or alerts. Workday offers 3 delivered organization types that you can use in a compensation review event. Supervisory, which is the most commonly used organization type, is a delivered organization type, but you can also choose cost center or location hierarchy. Additionally, you have the option to create custom organizations with custom hierarchies that can be used when necessary to represent your organization's unique approval flow. But you should remember that these require ongoing maintenance to keep the appropriate members and hierarchy relationships intact. Now let's talk about gathering specific details and requirements. The first thing you should evaluate is you should identify any changes that you may need to be made to your compensation plans. That could include the targets, proration rules, waiting periods, and individual or group-based performance factors like compensation matrices and/or scorecards that impact the pool or the award. It's key to remember here that dates matter. When you're editing your plan details, I recommend using the first day of the process period, January 1, 2019, for example, if you're updating an existing plan. You should be aware that multiple edits to the plan details during the same process period can impact what is used when the event is launched and can cause errors because subsequent edits to the plan with different dates will cause future edits to be overwritten. Edits to your plan details should be made prior to the launch of the event. Some details can be changed after the event is launched, but most of the details are fixed. And if there's an error, your only option might be to cancel the event, which is, as we all know, is no good. Compensation process validation rules are an example of configuration that cannot be added while the event is in progress, but they can be edited. Using the lessons learned that we gathered during the evaluation phase, in combination with new functionality that you've also evaluated, you should make adjustments to the process steps to improve the flow and the end user's experience. Some newer features include a review step for shared participation. The review step has view modify access to the organizations they are assigned as the reviewer. I've had several clients uptake this feature since March of this year with great success. It provides a nice summary view of all of the proposed awards that a reviewer role is responsible for and can provide good alternatives for higher level executives to review and approve the process in a summary format. You should also be sure to coordinate again with your talent group to ensure that the necessary individual and/or group-based performance factors will be available during the event. Are there new review templates? Are there updated rating scales, for example, that need to be included in the event? Any changes to the performance result inputs to the event need to be configured and tested prior to launch. If you're using eligibility rules or calculated fields as part of your configuration for plan profiles, matrices, scorecards, the grid configuration, or compensation statements, you're going to want to ensure that they're updated to account for changes in performance, hard-coded dates, or other values. And lastly, be sure to review security for the event and specifically confirm that support roles like HR business partners, for example, can participate in the event based on their responsibilities. Be sure to include security for reporting and dashboards. Are the delivered compensation search reports working as expected? Do they need to be customized? Do your end users know how to use them effectively? Reports in general can be a good way for planners and support roles to sift and sort the proposed awards outside of the grid environment to identify awards that might need a further review. Now that your process configuration is well underway, it's time to audit and prepare the information that will be used by the event. You should always audit and review your employee data. Use reports to confirm that employees are assigned appropriate plans with appropriate effective dates. If you're using proration rules, testing will reveal if employee history is correctly supporting the proration rules. Transactions that are incorrectly completed, corrected, or deleted, along with data loads like EIBs, for example, that are used for plan assignment, can impact a worker's compensation history and cause prorations to be inaccurate. As part of this audit, you should be reviewing for inclusion in the event as well as exclusion from the event. It should be noted that organizations that have not previously processed a compensation review event and who may have recently gone live with Workday may or may not have enough historical data in the worker history to support proration rules. You should consider completing pending HR transactions that could impact the data used for the event and that have effective dates that are on or before key dates for the event, like the process period end date, organization snapshot date, and compensation snapshot date. Make decisions about how HR transactions for employees who are part of the compensation event will be handled while the event is in progress. Will your organization have a freeze period for this population related to job, compensation, and staffing changes? Or will the organization configure parallel process rules to allow transactions during the in-progress event and resolve differences between the data in the compensation review event and the new transactions? You're going to want to test and verify that your configuration is working as expected. Then you're going to want to make adjustments to the configuration and the process based on your test results. Lastly, one thing that I highly recommend to my clients is using the compensation process template to document the process details that you've so carefully tested. The compensation process template is used during the initiation step of launching the process to pre-fill values related to the process dates, included plans, grid, shares, participation options, etc. When you've tested so diligently, why would you risk manually entering all this information and risking a mistake? Let's talk quickly about testing. I also break testing into 3 separate phases. The first phase of testing would be to test the functionality of the configuration that you've now evaluated, planned for, and modified. You're going to want to make sure that the planner and support role user interface is providing them with the information and access they need. Functionally, you're going to want to make sure that pools are being funded correctly and that the individual employee awards are calculating correctly. You're going to want to make sure that the expected performance results are being included and impacting the pools and awards per your requirements. And then lastly, in the functional phase, you're going to make any adjustments to your configuration during this testing phase, and you're going to test again. I find during the functional testing phase that I launch multiple events over and over again, evaluating the various pieces and making adjustments and corrections as necessary. Once you feel like your configuration is in its final format, I recommend completing an end-to-end test. During your end-to-end testing, you're going to create appropriate test scenarios that mimic your business practices. You're going to enforce that configuration and you're going to enforce your configuration and address known pain points. If you're using participation rules, includes test scenarios that test the various types of rules that you've configured, whether it's a rule related to termination events, parallel process events, or eligible earnings override rules. Again, I can't emphasize enough creating a compensation process template to be used during your testing and also when you launch. This will make testing simpler, and it will also serve as a template or the documentation of how you were successfully able to launch your event. During the end-to-end testing, you're going to want to finalize the event and make sure that it sends to your payroll and coordinate with payroll to ensure successful processing of awards like the base pay changes and bonuses according to your schedule and your key dates. And then lastly, if there's a third-party payroll, make sure that the appropriate information is passed via an integration or with reporting, and ensure that they have all the information they need to process correctly. Move your testing and confirmed configuration to your production tenant, and then you're going to want to complete an additional testing step by doing some regression testing in your sandbox tenant after it's been refreshed with your configuration from production. Now you've made all your changes and you've tested everything, and it's time to launch your event. You're ready for this because you followed all of these steps and you're prepared. Be sure to communicate the overall timeline as well as key dates to all of your stakeholders. Be sure to remind them about resources that are available to help them with the process, like reporting or who to contact with questions. Before launching, resolve pending HR transactions that impact the event. I highly recommend the shared participation step delay feature. The step delay feature will allow the compensation administrator to fully launch and access the event via the control page, but will delay notifications and the delivery of the inbox task to planners. The length of the delay is configurable. For example, you can configure a 1-day delay from the date and time of initiation. Use the delay period to review the data in the event and/or make any necessary adjustments, such as updating pools or awards for lump sum or additional adjustments to base pay. In the worst case scenario, if you discover a problem with your configuration that you can't recover from during the delay, you've now provided yourself with a window that you can cancel the process, make the correction, and relaunch without the high visibility of removing it from the planner's inboxes. Communicate throughout the process with your planners and support roles. Targeted alerts reminding planners about upcoming deadlines can be highly effective. Also, provide reports that spotlight pertinent information like total spend for direct and indirect reports in a hierarchy, for example, or awards that have been proposed that are outside of your organization's policies. This type of reporting, along with compensation review validation rules, can effectively reduce the amount of auditing and corrections that might need to be done by the compensation team after the event has been finalized. So let's wrap up with a quick overview on some compensation review functionality that was added as part of the Workday 32 release and that I've already mentioned in my comments. Many of you probably know that Workday is moving toward a single process for compensation review. They've previously announced that the standalone initiate bonus and initiate stock business processes will be deprecated, and the initiate merit process would be used for consolidated or standalone awards processing. The initiate bonus and initiate stock business processes are scheduled for deprecation in March 2020. The use of the initiate merit process as the single process for all awards is currently available in your production tenant. The initiate merit process will be renamed initiate compensation review process, also scheduled for March 2020. Rule-based definitions of the initiate merit process can currently be created and configured to support bonus or stock-only award events with different workflows, organizations, and planners. Your configurable grids will all need to be shared participation merit type grids, but when the initiate merit process is launched without a merit plan included, the merit tab of the configurable grid will not appear on the launched grid. The second newer piece of functionality is the reviewer step. So with Workday 32, which was this past March 2019, a new shared participation step was made available in the initiate merit business process, and it's identified as Review Employee Awards. When this step is added, the assigned reviewer security group can now see awards similar to the complete employee award step, but will have access to edit and approve all awards at once. You can configure multiple review employee award steps for different groups to review the awards either concurrently or in sequence. Many of my clients have uptaken this review step already with a great deal of success. So thanks for taking the time to let me share about compensation reviews. My colleague Melissa Campbell is now going to share with you about benefits open enrollment.
Thanks, Valerie. Good afternoon, everyone. As you're aware, annual open enrollment is a large project each year for your organization with high visibility and impact on your employees. In this segment, I'd like to cover topics that will help you plan, prepare, and manage the process for a successful open enrollment. First, you need to get ready. Your open enrollment can be easy if you've done all of your planning. So plan for your resources. Take time to use your Workday resources, use the open enrollment checklist, community posts for lessons learned and creative workarounds for your configuration. Review the trainings in LMS that include on-demand and in-person workshops. Prepare your plan. Don't go into this without a plan and a timeline. Make sure you know who's going to be responsible for what activities. Leverage your HRIS and your IT colleagues to be involved in the configuration and development of integrations. Your benefits SMEs will provide you with the expertise and decision-making for the project. Leverage your training and change management colleagues to support communication efforts. And you may have to rely on other HR colleagues as well to be your end users for testing activities. Your timeline should be taken into account based on when your open enrollment period is effective, and build the timeline backward to build in all the time needed to accomplish all those activities, including the decisions that have to be made, the configuration, the testing, and all of your communications. You're going to then want to gather all the specific details you need to start your plan. Gather any changes that need to be made for your plans, your vendors, your rates. You'll need to consider things like changes to group or plan eligibility because of changes in your population. You'll want to consider whether you're going to have an active or passive enrollment for this upcoming plan year. And also think about the process steps. Do you need any new steps in your process that were different from the previous year? Do you need review document steps or to-do steps because you may have new EOI requirements, or you might have documents from your vendors acknowledging certain information about the benefits that they are enrolling in? And of course, you want to start your vendor conversations so that you can make sure that any file requirements or integration changes are done in a timely manner. You also need to plan for your communications approach. You're going to be communicating with a lot of people. Decide who, what, and when you need to communicate and build that into your plan. Don't wait until the last minute to think about this. You need to think about all these areas that require more or less information based on complexity and changes for your new year. You might have to have communication specific to your employees, such as enrollment instructions, documents, training aids, change management plans, announcements and reminders. You're also going to need communications with your project team. You might have to provide the timeline to those team members so that they can plan their time accordingly to help you with all these stages. You'll also need to communicate with the stakeholders, such as your HR colleagues and all of your vendors on your timing. And you're going to be doing this before, during, and after your open enrollment. So think about all three stages of your communication plan. And of course, then you need to prepare. Prepare for the actual configuration and the event itself by closing your pending EOI enrollment. And your enrollments will be more up to date and defaulting in correctly into the enrollments for employees. Finalize those open benefit events that are sitting out there. Use your benefit event status reports that you can close any outstanding or pending events that will allow you to process open enrollment more easily and will reduce the number of on-hold events that you'll have. Confirm your eligibility for your groups. As you all know, when you initiate open enrollment, it's done based on benefit group. If your benefit groups and the eligibility for those benefit groups by person and by plan are not accurate when you initiate open enrollment, you're going to have some issues. The worst thing, just like Valerie mentioned, is to initiate that open enrollment and have something wrong and you have to cancel it and rescind it. Run your validation and enrollment reports. Use those delivered and custom reports that you have to gain insight into your current elections and eligibility for validation. Now I want to talk about best practices. So for the first step, obviously communication. I can't stress that more. Communication is key to your process. Add links into your enrollments, into the enrollment instructions for your employees so that they can go outside of Workday to get the information they need to make decisions about their enrollments. Leverage announcements and your Workday homepage to remind employees about their OE dates. Use email notifications within the open enrollment status report to help make this smoother for your employees. If you have custom dashboards, you can add a lot of information there as well. Best practices for the business process itself is that you don't want to have an approval step for your open enrollment. Obviously, there's a close and finalize process involved in your open enrollment events, and use that as your ability to validate the enrollments before you finalize instead of an approval step. The completion step on your business process should always be on the change benefit step. That way, as employees submit the process, it will come into your process for you to validate. And look at your business process again each year to make sure you don't need any of those additional steps beyond the change benefit step to provide either updates to employees and information they need, or gain information from them, such as EOI documents. In terms of best practices for enrollments, you'll always want to make sure that you include all of your plans that are in your calendar plan year in your open enrollment event. This is key. This is one of those situations that I see clients get themselves into each year, because they look at their open enrollment event as employee facing, and it should be employee facing. Obviously, this is the one time of the year they get to change their benefits unless they have a qualifying life event, but you also need to take into account the system. And knowing that Workday will end benefits for employees for any plans that are in their calendar year definition, if they don't re-enroll in them come the first of your plan year, is key to knowing which plans to include in your enrollment events. So even though you might think, and your employees might not be concerned about things or benefit plans such as basic life insurance that you provide to them, or short-term disability that you might provide free of charge to them, those might be included in your calendar year plan year, and you'll want to include them in your open enrollment events so that they remain current in your new plan year. I'd hate to see anyone have their open enrollment and then come 1/1 of the next plan year, everyone in your organization no longer has basic life or STD plan. Generally speaking, you'll want to make sure that you include your regulated annual renewals. So those should be included in your plan, and you'll want to make sure that you review your open enrollment event rules so that your defaulting is correct based on what you want to accomplish for that year. Make sure, again, like I said before, if your eligibility is wrong, your whole enrollment's going to be wrong. If eligibility is based on certain things that you need to change for the new plan year, make sure you've changed that and tested those changes before you initiate. And of course, if you use the ACA measurement functionality within Workday, make sure that you run your passive event before you initialize your enrollments. Run your audit reports. Run your benefit eligibility by benefit group report, your eligibility rules audit, and your benefit group audit reports to make sure all of these changes that you've made for your enrollment for your new plan year have taken effect as you would expect. If you're changing eligibility for groups or plans, make sure you review your cross-plan dependencies and your benefit defaults. You should also check your passive events and your plan mapping as well. In terms of your plans, check your rates, make sure you update your wellness data and your maximum and minimum contribution amounts for some of your plans, such as HSA or FSA, your 401k plans. Even if those aren't going to be included in your open enrollment, you always want to update those if needed. Your benefit annual rates, if used to derive coverage for your insurance plans, should be updated for the new plan year before you launch your open enrollment. If you are going to be offering new plans to your employees in the new plan year, you'll want to make sure you map old plans to the new plans so that the defaulting works correctly for you. Don't forget to work with your payroll department to look at your deduction and earning codes, to make sure those are up to date, and the period schedules. If your period schedules for your payroll are not up to date through the full plan year for which you're holding open enrollment, your HSA and FSA deductions will not work correctly when your employees are attempting to enroll. Some other best practices in regard to managing the open enrollment event, once you've done all of these preparations for your open enrollment, you're ready to launch. Obviously, you want to initiate the open enrollment and use the exclude workers with waiting periods for evaluating eligibility for your plans, and to exclude those employees that have waiting periods. You'll want to utilize your open enrollment status report to send reminder emails to your employees about the process and deadlines, and monitor on-hold events and nudge your workers to progress towards submission. You'll want to also think about coordination of events. Make sure that you review your benefit event status report to monitor open events that may impact employees' open enrollment completion. Encourage employees to complete their open events as quickly as they can, and inform them that they may need to complete open enrollment again if necessary because of the timing of those events. You'll want to also monitor eligibility of the workers during your open enrollment event. Make sure you leverage the eligible workers with no open enrollment events report so that you can add workers into your OE event that have become eligible since you launched it. And you'll also use the view workers no longer eligible for open enrollment to remove them from your OE event if needed. And of course, closing and finalizing open enrollment, that's an iterative process. You might have to do it several times after your OE period initially closes, potentially into your new plan year for open enrollment events that have been reprocessed due to coordination with other benefit events. Testing, can't emphasize this more, and just similar to your compensation review process that Valerie talked about, I consider benefits testing in 3 phases as well. You're going to want to initially test for all the functional changes that you've made in preparation for your open enrollment, the defaulting, your mapping. Make sure that you've made adjustments to the configuration during the functional testing. As you see things that aren't working as you expected, make those adjustments and initialize open enrollment over and over again until you've gone through some of those changes and make sure everything is the way you expect. You'll then want to do end-to-end testing with some of your HR colleagues, weaving in coordination of events and closing and finalizing, making sure those elections carry forward into your new plan year, leveraging those custom reports that you have to look at enrollment effective dated in the new plan year. And of course, you're going to want to work with your payroll colleagues to make sure that those payroll deductions are going to be coming from their paychecks on the right dates and in the right amounts. And of course, along with that, you're going to want to test your other processes and your integrations. Make sure that you've tested your OE files, that they are going to be able to be sent effectively to your vendors by the dates they've recommended. Review what's needed for your catch-up transactions. Are you going to be able to send files to your vendors between your OE file and the new year, or are you going to have to monitor catch-up transactions and communicate those to your vendors? Make sure that you update your schedules for your integrations and your passive events, and use your benefit changes report to monitor all of those transactions for you. I'd like to touch quickly on a few of the enhancements that Workday is working on for Workday 33. These are in preview now for you to review and test, but please note that the Workday does have the right to make any changes to the enhancements that I'll be discussing. There is a new workflow, redesign of the workflow for Workday 33. It's going to be more consistent with the experience that you have in the mobile app for open enrollment. So it utilizes larger icons and widgets or worklets to enroll in plans instead of the step-by-step pages that you're used to in the UI now. For Workday 33, you can opt out of this new UI change, and it's a simple step on your tenant setup HCM to opt out. They also will be enabling you to configure benefits open enrollment as an announcement task. So you'll actually be able to include the ability for an employee to go directly to their open enrollment event from an announcement on a work page, or on a workbook, sorry. And then you also have the ability to embed custom reports as step-related worklets within the open enrollment process if you would like to provide your employees with reports that might be helpful for them while they are making their decisions in their enrollment. Some other added features that might impact your open enrollment this year, but have impacts on other enrollments as well. The tobacco usage question has been updated in Workday 33 Preview to allow you to customize the worker response options. You can add additional responses and instructional text for both employees and the dependents, and then use those responses to create surcharges for individuals or groups based on that tobacco use. And finally, changes to dependents and beneficiaries. There'll be some additional enrollment instructions that you'll be able to add for the process when employees add dependents, so that while they're making their elections, they are adding new dependents or editing dependent information within the enrollment. You can add some instructions for them to do so that works more effectively for them. And you'll also be able to change your tenant setup for HCM task to allow for you to disable the link between emergency contacts, dependents, and beneficiary. Thank you so much for listening. And now Sarah is going to cover the topics of change management practices and user adoption around these annual events.
Thanks, Melissa. Okay, so if you've gone through the initial implementation of Workday, or really any software, you know that change doesn't stop at go live. You may want to implement some new functionality within the system after you go live. Maybe it was a little too much to take on at go live. There are reorganizations, mergers and acquisitions that drastically shift your employee base and therefore your needs within the Workday system. And of course, don't forget the biannual Workday updates. So there is constant change, and all of these things do encourage a response to the change from your Workday users. When we talk about change management practices, the method we typically recommend when consulting on an engagement starts with first assessing the impact to your organization and to their needs. So ask yourself, what is your current state? What are the changes that are going to be happening to your organization? And what are the needs that you might have for communicating or training your employees? Then you would build and execute your plans. So depending on the complexity of the change, the amount of stakeholders that are impacted by the change, it may require very specific sponsorship needs. Maybe you need to engage what we call a change champion network to help you with training and communication across the organization. And finally, after you've rolled out your communications and executed your training, you want to continue to evaluate and reinforce the changes. So ensure you're seeking feedback from your stakeholders. Is there anything that is confusing? Are people getting stuck in different parts of the transaction? Are the changes unclear? Then work to reinforce the change with any additional training and communication that might be needed. Before you start planning and executing those plans, make sure that you're evaluating your current state. As you dive in deeper in assessing the impact, which was the first step in the prior slide, consider any existing support mediums or resources that you already have in place throughout your organization. If, for example, you have an existing communication avenue or training teams, engage them early, keep them in mind as you begin rolling out communications and training. They can be strong advocates for you. As you consider your training approach, think about the appropriate training method for each audience. Depending on the complexity of the change and the impact to the various audience groups, you might find that an instructor-led course could be helpful. For smaller changes, your employee base may be just fine with a job aid or a quick reference guide. Your communications approach should also keep in mind all of your audience groups. One of the biggest components of early communication we like to emphasize with our clients is the WIFM, or what's in it for me. Ensure that it's simple, it's efficient, it maximizes on the wins for your employees. How will this make their lives easier? How will it make open enrollment less time-consuming? Finally, take all of these inputs and apply them to execute to your specific context and to the enterprise-wide objective of the change. So is this a one-time annual change like open enrollment, or is this going to be an ongoing and regular task that employees and managers are being asked to undertake? So when you complete the 4 steps on the previous slide, you'll notice that they're all inputs to your overall change plan. So evaluating that current state is a critical first step to the end goal, which is that overall change plan. There are several different change management approaches that are used in different ways at different times, depending on the need of the customer. For large expansions in Workday functionality, maybe you're rolling out an entirely new module, you've just acquired a company, we typically recommend a comprehensive assessment of the current state as well as the planned change, and then just ensuring that the development of communication and training plans is tailored to your various user groups. So if you engage collaborative in these efforts, all of these deliverables would be completed using our ProSci change management methodology. For those customers that are already live and might be seeking to improve their user adoption, executing a more targeted assessment of the area needing improvement and assisting in identifying that the change impacts by stakeholder group are the foundation of this second approach. Then we would probably build out a more specific plan for change management, training, and communications to support those very specific business events or occasional enhancements like the compensation planning and open enrollment events we discussed today. And finally, for managing the day-to-day, this approach tends to focus more on general support tied to optimizing Workday functionality and rolling out those biannual Workday updates. Some of these activities might include developing targeted communications, change management planning, and training advisory or even delivery support. So today we talked a little bit about recommended approaches to support and encourage end user adoption during some of your business's most critical annual events. Should you not have the resources to support a change of this nature or want additional guidance, Collaborative's organizational change and training team is more than happy to help support you in these efforts. This slide really outlines some of the more common tasks that we execute for our customers depending on the need. That was all that I had planned to cover in regards to change management and its role in ensuring successful user adoption for your Workday investment. So now I'll turn it back over to Kate so that she can open up the line for questions.
Thank you all. We've had a few questions come in, so we can just jump right in. A couple people have asked about whether or not we'd be sharing the presentation and the recording. And the answer is yes, we will be sharing this before the end of the week via email, so you can look for that in your inboxes. There's a question here for you, Sarah. You mentioned one of the first steps being identifying existing support and resources. how would you go about ensuring you don't leave any gaps in who might be able to give input in that space?
That's a great question. If you do have an internal training or communications team, I would start with reaching out to them and seeing what types of things they do for the organization, what resources they may have available to help you, whether that be a communications resource to help you frame up communications that will go out to various audiences, maybe a training resource to help you develop curriculum and deliver the necessary training, or even an internal web design team that might help you get your messages out on the company intranet. Those are just a couple of the areas where I would start. But yeah, that's a great question. If you want to discuss further, feel free to reach out to Kate and I can get in touch with you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next question. Which bonus or stock configurations might need to be adjusted if we are no longer going to use the standalone BPs, initiate bonus and initiate stock?
Hi, thanks. This is Valerie. Happy to answer that question. You will have to, if you currently use a custom shared participation grid, which most clients do, then you will need to make sure that the configuration that you're using for your standalone processes for bonus or stock are added to the merit shared participation grid, for example. And then, as I mentioned in my presentation, when you launch the initiate merit process without a merit plan included, it will drop off the merit tab. You can have multiple grids, but to use the new one process, you have to have all of your elements need to be included on a merit type grid. That's one thing you would have to change. Trying to think. That's probably the biggest change, because your comp validation rules will still be identified as either rules for merit, bonus, or stock. And then, of course, if you have separate processes, you're going to want to copy and make rule-based definitions of the initiate merit process, soon to be renamed initiate compensation review process, that will address your different workflows for the different types of awards.
Great, thanks, Valerie. This next question is for Melissa. What are some strategic ways to get HR business partners to prioritize OE? Having a hard time with engagement.
That is a difficult question, and I think that's one of those stumbling blocks or issues that probably every benefit team has encountered during the open enrollment process. I think one of the strategies that you can use is to communicate to them how important this is to the employees that they support too. And if their employees are having issues, then that will have a ripple effect on them as well. And if they support you in the preparation and testing phase, that everything will go smoother for their employees and they'll have less distractions for their employees during that time frame, which ultimately leads to work for them as well and their managers that they support.
Thanks, Melissa. I have one more question for you. How can Workday handle a passive enrollment? How does that work?
A passive enrollment is generally thought of as an enrollment where employees will not be required to make elections for the new year. From a system standpoint, that means configuring your enrollment event rules to default into their open enrollment event with all of the plans and enrollment levels, coverage levels, dependents that they currently have covered prior to the first of the year, obviously. However, I would caution that most enrollments are not completely passive. If you offer federally compliant benefit plans such as FSA plans, normally compliance would, or best practice would be to have those plans default in as waive so that your employees have to re-elect those plans every year. And HSA would be a similar situation. If you don't push your employees to go in and use their open enrollment event to re-enroll in those plans each year, it could provide some issues for them in the coming year. If you try to default those in and have a truly passive event for every single benefit plan you have, the year-to-date information may be inaccurate for your employees, and the annual goals for those plans might be inaccurate based on new maximums for the tax year.
Thank you, Melissa. And thank you to all of our speakers today. We're approaching the end of the hour and there's no more questions, but if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or someone on the collaborative marketing team, and we'd be happy to help you. Additionally, as I said before, we'll be sharing a recording to today's presentation via email before the end of the week. Thank you again for joining us and have a great day.